We reversed. Holy crap! I like this side, Andrew. So, welcome to the Legacy Right. We got a special guest on this live edition. So, join
Speaking
in.
of,
So I was gonna keep him backstage as a surprise, but okay. Mike
oh, okay.
Decentralized. Mike Decentralized
Surprise!
is back. Welcome back to the Legacy Right. We always love bringing Mike on. So, but we're live now. So
Live
hopefully,
in person. That's good stuff,
yeah.
man.
So
Thank you for
hopefully
having
we
me
get.
back, gentlemen.
So hey, thank
No
you for
problem,
coming
man.
back. So,
Yeah.
but you know how we do this, though, Andrew. We got to do the intros. So it says it right there. I am the legacy of Jennifer Ent Kaiser. I am Zachary Kaiser. This is Andrew Joseph, and commies deserve free rides. So you can cop this shirt at whotouchedit.com.
Oh,
Fantastic, dude.
yeah.
Uh,
My
Fantastic.
background is from the shirt I got from him too. In the Fed.
See,
Yeah.
see, Mike knows right there. So, whotouchedit.com. So go help him out. He's a cool dude. Follow him on Twitter. Just who touched that thermostat on Twitter X, whatever you want to call it. So let's jump into the show because there's a lot of dystopian esque
Oh.
things going on in this world of ours.
Next,
So from
yeah, it's more so every day. Yeah.
every right now it's I mean here in the stateside, of course. I mean, we could talk about the UK and Scotland. I mean, we got Stephen over there, so holding it down. But like over here, you got so much stupid stuff going on with like what's going on in Springfield and Aurora, Colorado. But I mean, is that really the main story? Like, no.
No.
it's all smoke screen.
Right.
So, I mean,
Misdirection.
it is. Well, meanwhile, they're eroding your rights every day as they possibly can. I just saw a tweet that somebody posted in a group chat that I'm in on X, and it was Senator Griffith. I guess he is his senator. Or congressman. Excuse me. I don't know why I said senator, but anyways, he sent him a letter because or something, trying to get a hold of him about Massey's concealed carry act that he's trying to get through, and he basically pretty much just showed his neocon colors in there and basically say, well, the Second Amendment is interpreted like this and that. It's like, as long as you're law abiding, it's like, no, shall not be infringed.
Yeah, right.
Come on, man. I mean, really. But that's what we're up against. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so to get started here, like, I guess the best thing to do is to go grassroots and stay local. Am I right, Mike? So,
Yeah. It really is the only place we're going to have any measurable, I think, success for liberty, right? Because you understand like your local community better than anybody else. But the other thing that I'm seeing is, this machine that is being foisted on us from the top down is it's not going to go away on its own. It's going to take a concerted effort locally, though, because that you can't. It's like there's no going and changing it from within anymore. Like you really don't get me wrong. I appreciate you mentioned Thomas Massey. I appreciate the few voices at the national level that are speaking out on behalf of individual liberty. They are a precious few, and unlike Massey, even the ones that do are hit and miss, right? So I mean, at best, I think there's maybe a dozen that you can count on to at least come close to the libertarian position periodically, but Massey's consistent almost every time. But again, that's the exception, and the vast majority of our nationally elected politicians are just part of the mutual controlled opposition grift. So nothing changes ultimately, right? The problems still persist. Society's issues still persist. We're not going to see any relief or any help from the federal government, and instead we're going to have our rights eroded by that federal government. So if we don't start training our neighbors and whoever we can build any kind of coalition with at the local level on the fine art and lost tradition of nullification, then I don't see a way out of this. The federal government isn't going to suddenly become, libertarian and fire itself, for the most part, right? The principles that the country was founded on are so long forgotten. It's ridiculous that when people talk about, oh, our democracy, our this, our that. I mean, just the words that they use to describe what our government is supposed to be is so far from the mark that we really can't be counting on anything to change at the federal level. I mean, it's great to, like I said, to have messengers like Massey who are at least exposing the darkness for what it is. But he's one guy, and it's a tiny minority that ever go against, the massive dystopian grain stemming out of the federal government. So by working locally, building coalitions locally, educating people locally, engaging in civil discourse locally, we at least have a chance to introduce the concept of nullification, of these ridiculously dystopian things that are emerging out of the national and in many cases the state governments where we all live. And that's the only place I can think where we can actually have a significant victory is at the local level. And it's also kind of nice how the local level isn't really, almost in most places, local governance is not partisan, or at least not supposed to be, even though it is. But it's not. You don't have to say, well, I'm this, I'm a that, I'm a whatever. Like, I don't necessarily have to come right out and tell everybody, oh yeah, I'm an agorist, libertarian, or whatever. It doesn't. These things don't matter as much as the effort itself. And once people get a taste of what nullification can be, I think it'll start to really catch on. I truly think that it's a lost, deliberately buried, like, secret. People talk about these lost secrets, right? Of lost secrets of our civilization. Well, that's probably the most important one. And most people don't even know that we have the right to do that. That it's a common law tradition that we can use to essentially challenge the unjust governance of larger governing bodies.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking backstage. I mean, we've seen the nullification process against the federal government. Like we were talking about California and the cannabis laws. I mean, first issued in '96. I mean, that's nullification. Like that's literally sticking a stick up the government's ass, the federal government's ass, and saying, go to hell. Like, we're going to do this. I mean, obviously it's backfired.
California. It's funny to even be defending my state, but that's the one thing we really got right. But it came from the people. It came from, like, okay, Schedule 1. Yeah, that's great. You can forget your Schedule 1. We are doing things differently in this state because we know better than whatever moron decided to put a plant on a Schedule 1. But whatever. It's one of the few things I can honestly be proud of in terms of California government.
Well, I mean, speaking of, you have a concentrated message that's actually consistent and delivered.
Well, speaking of plants, like I don't even think heroin and cocaine are Schedule 1s. I think they're Schedule 2s.
Yeah, that might be true, but either way, the idea that the federal government can do, I mean, it's unconscionable that we have a centralized power that says you can't consume this thing that you can grow in your backyard. You're not. As a consenting adult anyway. Like, I can understand, protecting minors. Okay, that's maybe a legitimate possible thing. That's a legitimate concern. But the idea that the government can do this at all, I mean, talk about it just runs contrary to the principles that the nation was founded on. Like, it's a direct opposition to that, and people should be more. Again, sometimes I've had to really bite my tongue because I'm all about building coalitions, and a lot of times I'm building coalitions now, especially with people who have a conservative mindset, and there's some social conservatives there, right? There's no question that I have to kind of explain patiently my position on cannabis legalization and so forth to people who think it's the worst thing in the world. Like, how could you do? It's a drug. It's this, and it just requires a lot of patience. So by me saying we need to involve ourselves locally to train people and educate our neighbors on how to engage in nullification, it also means being patient as hell with a lot of their outdated worldviews and a lot of their entrenched like belief structures that may actually run contrary to liberty, but they don't know, right? So you kind of have to really be patient, and it's been a test of my patience, but I got to do it because I don't see any other way. I don't see any other way to stop the dystopia from just getting larger and more oppressive. And it requires civil discourse. You know, it requires being patient with my neighbors and trying to build those coalitions with people who ordinarily wouldn't want to be working with somebody who thinks that the drug war should be ended, you know, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's no different from, like, say, the abortion issue with that. I mean, you got a lot of staunch liberals that are pro-choice, and I mean, you gotta be patient. You gotta make that compromise. And most liberals, honestly, they're pro-choice. They're made to be pro-choice. I mean, they don't want the government to step in and, I mean, use taxpayer money for sacrifices to Moloch. Most of them are
right.
staunchly this pro-choice. Like, let's keep it between the woman, the doctor, and the government out of it. Like,
yeah,
so
it's interesting, isn't it? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
probably the most nuanced topic. And I'm like you, Zach. I mean, I look at abortion as an initiation of force, you know, against but against a separate individual. But I'm also dealing with the reality of an entrenched. I'm going to go ahead and call it what it is: sorcery that has manipulated people into thinking that that's not a human being. And these are people that are under that spell. And I just pretend that I can dispel that manipulation, that manipulated perspective away from somebody overnight. And then what's more is I don't have the luxury of waiting until I can explain things well enough or get it. All I can do really at this point is I capture the one thing that we can agree on, at least on principle. We may not agree on that particular topic. We can agree on principle that the government shouldn't be involved in the personal health decisions of the individual. And so usually what I'm able to do is extend that to, the people who quite hypocritically will say I'm 100% for a woman's right to choose, except when it comes to being vaccinated, in which case wind that woman up and stick that needle in her, right? It's like the hypocrisy of bodily autonomy. It's like it's either one or the other, right? And for the ones that can grasp that, yes, I believe in bodily autonomy, and therefore that includes, rejecting the idea of forced vaccination. That's somebody that we can work with, right? That's somebody I can build a coalition around, at least around certain things that matter, because I can table the abortion debate, right? I can table it because it is a nuanced issue. It isn't something that I can easily, say, oh, well, this has to be absolute. It also isn't something that I go and say, well, I may feel that this is an initiation of force. I really believe that it is. But I don't necessarily believe that the government should be in there policing everything. I think there may be something else. There's another way to go about shifting away from abortion culturally that I think is going to be more significant and better than just criminalizing it outright necessarily, even though I do think it might be a crime. So again, I can table certain issues in favor of let's get free first. Let's make sure that we're not going to the gulag because of our social media posts like they are in the UK. Let's make sure that our individual liberty is protected in this township of where in this community where we live. I can usually put aside a lot of differences, right, in order to achieve that objective first and foremost. Yeah. And I'd much rather work out the subtleties and nuances of these complex issues with people on a local level anyway, right? That's like, okay, so what can we do to maybe bridge the gap between unwanted pregnancies and people who are desperate to have children? Like, let's look at something constructive. How about instead of fighting each other, we try to find a solution together? And that's a product of civil discourse. It's easier said than done. But I don't see another way out of this. We're going to have to do this. They're certainly not going to get any relief from the national level, from the top down. It has to be from the bottom up.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much how it goes. I mean, you have to be able to find certain common ground with everybody and go with the flow, honestly. realistically. I mean, not everybody's going to agree, but I think one thing is we can agree on one thing, and that is we want to be able to be left alone, go to work, come home, relax, do some work around home, be with the family, play with the dog or the kitty cat. I mean, and not have to be just stomped down upon by this big giant boot that's just on our face right now. Like I think that's where most people are, in my opinion.
I think a slight majority. All right, and that's cause for optimism, because what what I describe, in a revival of common sense is, anybody that thinks that there's something wrong, that knows something instinctively is wrong. And it reminds me of the line. I don't think it was in the original comic, but in V for Vendetta, V actually, in his little hacked-in announcement to the people of Great Britain, he says, can't you tell isn't there something terribly wrong with this country, right? There's something wrong. If you can just have that sense that there is something really, really wrong, that this isn't, anything like it was even 50, 40 years ago. There's something really different about the political landscape right now in this country, how governance is conducted in this country. Then you're probably going to be somebody I can build a coalition with. And then you're probably part of the team, so to speak. On one sense or another, you're aware that there's something that needs to be resisted, right? It's funny how they use the hashtag resist all these time for all these things that are totally the opposite of resistance. But what I'm talking about, again, on a personal level, individual level, are people that know there's something instinctively wrong. And old school Democrats fit that category pretty well, right? The old school question authority, the actual, like, if you remember actual leftists before Obama was in office, and certainly, better yet, in the 70s and 80s, or better, even the 60s. These were the question authority, think for yourself, anti-surveillance state, anti-war, anti-censorship political left. There's still some people. There's still some people who think that they are leftists or identify as leftists or whatever, liberals, who have those values, right? Yeah. They're still out there. They may not like some of the same conclusions that I come to. They may not, certainly won't share my feelings about taxation or gun ownership or anything like that, but they'll get some of the other stuff that the Democrat Party no longer embraces. Certainly can't say that the Democrat Party is anti-war in any way, shape, or form. I mean, is there any war that they don't support now? I mean, it's just very different from the Democratic Party even when I was growing up. They at least pretended to be anti-war. That's long gone. So here we are. We actually have, if you approach them individually at the local level, you'll probably run into some people who identify as Democrats, but they're of the old school variety. And they're never ever going to be Republican. They might never be Libertarian, but they know there's something wrong.
They'll lean into your line of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. At least enough to for you to get a chance to educate and get a chance for you to get them sharing their energy and their effort on a cause that will actually help make them more secure in their liberties, right? That's all I'm really looking to do at this point. It's like I'm trying to get people on board with the idea that their liberty is in jeopardy. Their individual liberty is very much in jeopardy from this Leviathan government, and we need to stick together even if we disagree on some of the finer points of some of these broad, very nuanced issues. We need to defend ourselves from whatever the heck this monstrosity has become at the federal level, and even in many cases, particularly in my state, at the state level. So I think I'm optimistic because it relies on the one thing. To do this, it relies on the one thing that this top-down dystopian government doesn't want, which is civil discourse between its citizens. Right? Once they figure out that we're talking to each other and we're getting along, we're overcoming differences and we're working together in spite of differences and whatnot, it might get kind of dangerous because that's the last thing they want. I mean, the whole of society is certainly the media and social media in particular are geared towards the opposite. It's geared towards exacerbating conflict. It's geared towards making conflict happen conflict engagement, outrage. That's what everything is geared to doing. That getting people outraged at each other, and God forbid you express a nuanced point, because then everybody like that. Those are the people that get jumped on the most, particularly in social media. It's like, oh, you're expressing nuance. Oh, you're sorry, you're a Russian bot. You're how much is Putin paying you? Or the other side. Oh, you're just some. People can be so dismissive, right?
You're a maggot or a my god or whatever.
Yeah, you're mag hat.
Yeah,
You don't know. You're these things.
You're a dirty Trumper.
Yeah, you're deplorable, right? They still use deplorable. Can you believe it's been how long? And there's a concerted effort to dehumanize the other side. They used to call it othering, right? And it's all over the place, particularly on social media. And again, it's like even nuance itself has almost been vilified. Like you can't have a nuanced opinion without you being some sort of traitor or in league with some bad guy. And it all started. We can all point back to the aftermath of 9/11. By the time 2002 came around, if you questioned invading Iraq and Afghanistan, you were on the side of the terrorists. And honestly, that tactic has been in play ever since, right? It really has. And they're bringing it back. If you don't support the war in Ukraine, then if you are questioning the importance of risking nuclear war, then you're obviously an agent of Putin. It's ridiculous, right? And yet, that's the world we can counteract when we engage in civil discourse. Now, wait a minute. What about this? What about you just talk to people and you figure out where they're at. And I'm not saying that there aren't going to be people you encounter who are going to be too far gone, but you're going to be able to identify them relatively quickly, I think, nowadays. If they keep coming back to, well, the government's my friend, I trust the government, the government says this, the government says that, and I trust my government. Okay, they're probably not going to join your coalition, right? And nor would you want them to. But what I'm finding is, I think that at least subjectively, and I'm talking mostly in Huntington Beach and a little bit down here where I live in South Orange County. I think I'm finding people who, again, don't identify as conservative, but realize that there's something wrong, right? This isn't, like maybe they're not too keen on the fact that Kamala Harris was selected rather than elected. There's kind of like, well, this is, I mean, I can't stand Trump, but this is really weird too. You know what I mean? Like there's people like that. So I am a little optimistic, but I'm not optimistic about the national level, right? I think there's not much that can be done about the national level apart from, in the case of liberty-minded candidates, sending a liberty message. I do think that there's only going to be maybe the equivalent of an average of 3 seats, of which Massey is the only 100% one, probably in Congress that will consistently speak a message of liberty. But as awesome as that is, does his stuff ever get? I mean, honestly, does he ever get like a truly libertarian thing ever passed? It doesn't. It doesn't happen. Yeah. They're not. There's no appetite for it.
It's because at the national level, it doesn't scale adequately to answer all the calls for all the laws. So there's no voice for every law that's passed.
That's right.
To say yes or no, that's appropriate for the vast majority of the population.
Well, he did get. I don't know if it passed though. I don't know, but he was able to get a number of support, a lot of Democrats, as well, with the Yemeni war that we were involved with. So
there's trust me, it would be so much worse if he wasn't there, right?
Yeah,
it would be so much worse. But all I'm looking at is, and I'm so glad that he's there to at least point out the nonsense and at least like kind of like harken back to the day when there was maybe a justifiable purpose for that body to even exist, right? I mean, at least like
the Ron Paul days.
Yeah, right. It's exactly right. It's the same kind of thing. He's just continuing the tradition of Ron Paul. But I do think that that it would be a lot worse if he wasn't there. But I do know that he's not really there. He can't really move the needle towards liberty, but he can keep it from going maybe full on dystopia because he's just one guy. You know, even with the God on his side, he's still just one guy. You know, and a handful of relatively selective allies, you know, from time to time who will occasionally back him up for the right reasons. But most everybody is going to go along with the mutual controlled opposition grift. That's at the national level and most state levels too. So it really behooves us at the local level where we can have some kind of impact to try to just nullify the nonsense coming out of our state and particularly the federal government. It keeps coming back to that, no matter which way I slice it. It's like great messaging to have at the national level. It's great that we have somebody who's like a freaking John the Baptist voice in the wilderness, you know, preaching liberty to an audience that doesn't want to hear it at the national level. To all the snakes and the backbiters in the Washington cabal, but it doesn't really move the needle the way it needs to go. We're still losing liberty. There's still, you know, for everything that Massey can actually accomplish, all of his enemies accomplish far more. And so I just think it's up to us. It comes back, and no matter which way I analyze it, it comes back to local action and taking local actions as a means of self-defense. You know, building these coalitions, doing what we have to do to use our local governing bodies to nullify the larger ones.
Yeah, speaking of that, I finally met I actually work with them. I finally met my first up here around my area, my first Trumper that actually kind of gets it a little bit. Kind of, it's like, oh, you could probably talk to this guy and maybe he can spread a little bit of message of some libertarian ordeals. I mean, get away from Trump, but I mean, he kind of gets it economically. The only thing I discredit him on is he still thinks we were better off when Donald Trump was president. Like, well, economies go boom and bust. It's a slow process. So
yeah,
but you're right. We were better off during his 4 years, but not really because of Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's put it this way: Trump definitely did more good things than Hillary Clinton. But when it comes right down to it, I don't need to. This is the other thing. I don't need to get into the finer details of why Trump isn't that great with some of these people. It's like, look, yeah, I could go into great detail if it was necessary to say why, you know, he's a mixed bag. He's unprincipled. He can, you know, sometimes he hits it, you know, dead on the, you know, dead right. He's like, wow, this is actually, okay, reduce taxes. You need to reduce taxes. Oh, make it, you know, deregulate. Yes, deregulate. Okay, yes, do all of those things. But then he'll do something other crazy thing that's completely authoritarian, and you just go, oh, come on. Yeah, then he'll ban the bump stock or something, you know. But he'll do. He's a mixed bag at best. He's no Calvin Coolidge. He's sure as heck is, I mean, you know, no Thomas Jefferson. But the point is he's he did get a couple things right, which I don't think would have happened if it was the alternative. You know, if Hillary Clinton got in, I think it would have been worse. So you got that going for him. But I don't feel the need to school Trumpers on Trump's faults as much. You know, I will, like, if it comes up, I'll say, look, yeah, I have a problem with this, and this, and this, but let's worry about our neighborhood. Let's worry about our city. Yeah. Let's concern ourselves with this, because even if Trump is half the Messiah, you know, a lot of Trumpers think he is, and he gets in, he pulls a Grover Cleveland and gets elected again, which I think is, by the way, really questionable. But if he gets in for his a second non-consecutive term, what does that buy us? You know, let's say he's everything wonderful that you think he is. What does that buy us? What is he going to do?
4 years.
Yeah, we got 4 years of him maybe being the focus of the intelligence agencies, and everybody sabotaging. Maybe it'd be even worse. So he runs at best. He's running interference for us for 4 years, where we get together and work locally to try to nullify whatever monstrosity comes in after him. Because you know there will be, if he gets in, there will be nothing but backlash, and they will bring on. I mean, it's, first of all, I'm sort of darkly impressed with how they managed to resuscitate Kamala Harris from one of the, if not the, certainly one of the least popular vice presidents in history. Everybody, thought poorly of, for the most part, even Democrats, to the messiah figure of their own, of the Democratic side. Like, that happened so fast, right? I'm almost like, that's some serious sorcery, right? That's like, there's some dark energy that created that, because that's not natural.
They might have been playing this since Joe Biden was elected to begin with. They knew
They may have
this from the beginning.
I tend to think so, but boy, did they have to. And I kind of buy this to a certain extent, like the messaging. Not that I believe the message, but I believe that this is part of the rehabilitation. Was, now that she's able to shine on her own, and she doesn't have this this fossil holding her back anymore. They can't come out and say that, but there's some. I can kind of see that message. I don't think it's true, but I can see how that could be effective as a message. But this is still, even given that, this was a radical turnaround. I can't even believe how fast it went from, she's an imbecile to she's going to save us from Donald Trump. If they can do that with her, think about what they can do with somebody who's actually articulate. Like, and I hate to say it because he's downright evil, but somebody like my governor, in 2020, right? I mean, think hard about this now, right? At best, and this is the message I give to my Trumper friends, right? At best, you get a four-year reprieve to prepare. So be prepared, because they will come out guns blazing in 2028. So for those folks, I say at best we got 4 years. And by the way, you need to be prepared to not have those 4 years. Herein lies the other sort of important, urgent aspect of the Township Liberation message, is that don't be goaded into civil war, right? Don't be goaded into desperate acts of violence. Nullification is by and large peaceful, right? It's just peaceful non-compliance. It's civil disobedience. Henry David Thoreau's civil disobedience should be required reading for everybody, because we're going to have to do what he says in that book, regardless. We're going to have to practice civil disobedience. And it is generally peaceful, but it is definitely risky, right? And it is way better than playing into their hands with any kind of violence. We all know if push came to shove, trust me, I get the sentiment. We're the most well-armed people that the world has ever seen, most well-armed citizens that the world has ever seen, by far. If there ever was a civil war, I think the right-wing side or people would win, right? But why go there if we don't have to, right? We can just nullify our way ahead rather than guns blazing, inviting the U.S. government to giving them the excuse to drone their own citizens, to use their military against them. Let's just not go there. Let's just systematically practice what's built into common law and the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation and the Anti-Federalist Papers and some of the stuff that I prefer as far as the Founding Father document. Let's engage with that process instead of falling into their hands and playing into what they want, which is an excuse to radically increase federal power yet again. So that's really the other side of the message. Is if it doesn't go the way the Trumpers want after Guy Fawkes Day, November 5th of November, if it doesn't go the Trump way, isn't that wild? By the way, yeah, that is
wild. But they were all theirs is July 4th and ours is on November 5th.
Ours that's November 5th. That's never happened before, ever. 2020 is so unique how closely we're paralleling. We should come back to that because that's actually worth talking about. But the point is the act of nullification is the antidote for even if we don't get another 4 years of Donald Trump, right? For even if Kamala Harris's Messiah packaging somehow pays off, or the fix is in, or whatever it is, she gets into office instead of Trump. My message to my Trumper friends is please don't give in. Just start. No, it just means that we'll have to work faster and more aggressively at the local level to build coalitions and start actively nullifying right away. Right. So 4 years, hey, we may get that reprieve if your guy gets in. But even if he doesn't, we have to, it comes back to practicing nullification and getting that, like, that needs to become the new buzzword among, around the Trump community, as far as I'm concerned as well. That's why I feel like I'm being like an evangelist to the Trumpers right now. It's like, let's practice nullification. But also, it does blow my mind that in 2024, a couple things, right? I mean, first of all, I've said for years, and you know this, Zach, because both of you guys have talked to me about that long. But the dystopian playbook is being used uniformly by governments all over the world, and it's the same playbook. The COVID tyranny proved that, right? That was proven out. People were saying the same thing. Jacinda Ardern was saying the same thing in New Zealand that Justin Trudeau was saying in Canada, that Joe Biden started to say once he entered the White House. We'll say in 2020, officially in 2021, they all were speaking the same thing. Even Boris Johnson at the time in the UK. So everybody was saying, "Oh, God help the Australians." It's a whole other topic. But the fact is they were all playing from the same playbook, right? They're all implementing the same kind of policies. They're all saying the same, doing the same exact rhetoric, and it was all against anybody that dared challenge the authority of the experts and the federal government and the World Health Organization, or in our case, the CDC as well. It was the same dystopian nonsense. Now, fast forward to 2024, and we have a new government in the United Kingdom. Keir Starmer enters in with a seemingly big victory for the Labour Party in the UK, and immediately starts implementing like draconian censorship, a censorship state, like the kind of which that one of their best writers warned them about. Right? Yeah. Like literally walking right into an Orwell novel. Like, are you serious right now? You're actually fulfilling the darker prophecy.
It's a prophecy.
One of your best writers. Right. Like what we have just recently now, we have Hillary Clinton basically saying we need to do the same thing in America. We have my governor signing a law, basically. Right.
I saw that.
Right. Signing a law that says you can't have misleading material, AI generated misleading campaign material. And of course, I'm saying misleading show me some campaign material that isn't misleading. First of all, that's actually really hard. So it's this deeply disturbing similarity between this crushing attack on free speech across political figures in the U.S. and of course the actual parliament in the UK. And in 2024, this blows my mind. Their election that put this guy into office, Keir Stalin, as I call him, is taking place on July 4th, United States Independence Day. And the U.S. election is taking place on Guy Fawkes Day. Remember, the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I can think of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot, right? That's our election day. So I think there's a parallel between the two countries that there hasn't been before, and it's very telling to me why this is happening. And it sounds the alarm to me that like the battle for individual liberty is going on simultaneously in our two countries, and really throughout the Western world. Certainly around the Five Eyes, Ireland too, for that matter. It's really the same thing, and I think it's never been a better time to, while I talk a lot about building coalitions locally, I think that is the ultimate, that's where the rubber meets the road. We have this great tool, as long as we can access it, because who knows what they're going to pull next, but as long as we can access it, we have this fantastic tool that unifies liberty people across the world. So we can learn from a Stephen McNamara in Scotland and what he's doing, and we can compare notes, like this is what worked for me in Kilmarnock, Scotland. This is what worked in Huntington Beach, California. This is what worked in Indiana. This is what worked here, and here. And we can compare notes, and we can also kind of help inspire the coalitions that we're building locally by connecting them to other local coalitions, not just around the country, but around the world. And I do think that's got to be an edge for us. It's another reason why I'm optimistic, is because not only are we not alone in this country, we're not alone in the world. We have brothers and sisters of liberty fighting for liberty everywhere. And just speaking of which, I mean, same time zone as the UK, Nigeria. What Ecom pulled off this last earlier this week, amazing, miraculous transformation of people who have never heard the message. I mean, he's a liberty evangelist, for crying out loud. People have never heard the message of liberty, and they're eating it up. I mean, eventually, that's going to get too big even for their repressive government to contain. Although I'm still concerned about that for him. But still, that's the kind of world that we're living in now. Is that the enemies of liberty are for sure working globally against people like us. But thanks to modern technology, we can work together against them across the world. And that's another. Again, I can't help but feel a little bit optimistic about that. This is a unique place in history, so I think we should relish it, enjoy the fight, and keep each other inspired across the world.
And that's the danger. So I mean, we can unify, we can use this technology, but that's the danger right there, is because they know that the jig is up, so they're going to get just as more volatile. Almost said violent, but violent too. So they're going to get more volatile and violent with their repression against all of us.
Well,
all
they may
people.
talk about World War III, right? I mean, there may be I hate to say it, but limited nuclear war is on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is. So if they really wanted to play their cards the most dystopian way they can, limited nuclear exchange with Russia. Why not? So I temper my. That's why I have guarded optimism, because I temper it with the reality that the psychopaths that run that are running this operation, this global dystopian operation, have no problem. If they decide, time to let a few nukes fly, they will fly. And horrific. To people like us, especially, that's a horrific idea. We have to be fortunately prepared for ugly reprisal as they try to hang on to the power from exactly what it is we're discussing here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I just mean, like, on the local level, the use of this migrant crisis all across the world, all across the West for the most part, that in itself is going to be stemming towards it. That's stemming to more repressive and what's the word? Yeah, more repressive laws in the manner of very teetering on the edge of martial law, just because everything's so chaotic. I mean, that's a scary aspect in itself.
Yeah, so. The generating any number of things which are creating, and there's plenty of opportunities for them to do this. Generating anything that's going to create enough civil unrest, justify, imposing martial law. Which is why, again, there's some for acting now, acting as soon as possible, and getting to know I'm getting to know my local sheriff, the sheriff captain in my local area. Cool guy. All right, honest to God, he was the first one when I first heard that. The Metropolitan Police in the UK were threatening to extradite people from other countries for violating their social media hate laws. I'm like, okay, would you guys actually extradite me if I got myself in trouble with the government of the UK? They're like, no. He's like, no, that's not even anywhere on our radar. That is something we don't like. You would have to pass. This is how he describes it. You would have to pass our American threshold test of a threatening post. Like, it would have to mean, meet our criteria first before we would even look at investigating. And then you'd have to be, in order for us to extradite you, you'd have to show that you have a credible threat you're a credible threat in that country, and you're not in that country. So it's bizarre how these things take on a life of their own. It's pure hot air intimidation in one sense, right? So again, it comes back to getting to know your local, I hate to say it, use the word, authorities, and figure out what makes them tick, get to know them, and then also start asking the questions. Like, my next question to our sheriff captain here is, if Gavin Newsom decides to declare martial law because of a state of emergency, what would be your response? Like, how do you go about qualifying that? Because he already told me as well in an earlier conversation, from a few years ago, we're not enforcing his lockdowns, and he passes that gun. We're not enforcing the gun restriction. We're not enforcing any of that stuff. So I'm as skeptical of law enforcement as most people in the liberty movement. But I got to say, so far, this guy's passing a key litmus test for me. but that's just it. You got to engage. You got to figure out what your local law enforcement do, given a potential quasi-manufactured crisis or whatever. Because these are the things you guys are rightly pointing out. These are the things they're more than capable of doing, and more than happy to do to try to prevent what it is we're talking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me step back into the reprieve thing he was talking about for if Trump was to get in for just a minute.
That's the most rosy picture I think.
Yeah, anticipating he gets in, what do you think the odds are of him appointing RFK Jr. to like the head of the CIA? He's like a transparency move.
That would be so sick. I would appreciate that, because that's honestly one of the few topics. Well, there's a handful of topics where I think RFK is actually probably the right guy for the job, right? It's like he gets it right. Like there's a lot of things where he gets. I think honestly, I'm pretty forgiving of RFK Jr. too. I think he means well, but he's still a statist, right? He really is. Yeah. And some topics he's extremely statist. But on the topic of the intelligence community, not so statist. I think he's okay. Like with that, I would go, yeah, you're a guy. It's almost the same thing as appointing Ron Paul head of the Federal Reserve. You know, it's like you pretty much like you're going to appoint this guy to have him do what his uncle couldn't do, which is break it into a million pieces and scatter it into the wind. So I would love to see RFK Jr. get the opportunity to do what his uncle couldn't do. So in fact, that would be a celebration.
Any bigger power would he be president after that? It's like Bush Senior.
Yes.
What would you think if he got any other cabinet position, like say, what is that? Health and Human Services.
Yeah, Health and Human Services. Mixed feelings about that, obviously, because he still has a very statist perspective about health. Yeah. Right. He has the right opinion about forced vaccinations in general, and honestly, I think his health advice, for the most part, I think his concept of health is actually pretty sound. I can't really find. I'm not a health expert myself, but it doesn't sound like anything that would contradict from my own views. But what I wouldn't like is it being forced on people, right? I mean, you know, it's like let's not have the government. Why is the government even doing this? You know, I don't think he would ask that question. You know, that's the part that would bug me about him taking on that kind of a role is should this role even exist? I do feel a lot more confident that if you took on the head of the CIA, he would very easily say, "Why does this even exist?" and probably do away with it, right? The Department of Health and Human Services or anything of that nature, or EPA, even worse. I wouldn't trust him with that at all.
No, I wouldn't either.
You know, right? But you know, again, everybody's got their thing. He's an old school leftist, right? And I think I mentioned old school leftist earlier.
Yeah.
When it came to war, when it came to, and again, he's kind of selective on the war thing too, isn't he? But
Israel,
right? But that's most of the GOP, including Trump, right? Right? I mean, who again is like doesn't support Israel militarily? Thomas Massey, once again. But the point is you know, he's good on, mostly good on war. He's definitely good on surveillance state stuff. I would put him in charge of the NSA. I feel the same way about anything intelligence agency. I would love for him to be in charge of, so he would dismantle it and throw it to the wind. That's about it, though. Anything else, I'm not so sure about with him.
Yeah. So
I would be going in and playing a NSA card too, just like RFK Jr.
Yeah,
I could see that. Yeah, I could even see. I mean, even Attorney General, just like his father or his uncle. Yeah, his father.
His father
would.
Right.
Yeah, his father would probably be a good position.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's a consumer advocate, right? Like that's his bread and butter as an attorney, right? So that would actually be a good spot for him. Put him in anything to where he can kind of wreak havoc to dismantle it.
Yes,
I'm game.
I'm kind of game too. I still think in that role he would still probably do just like Trump's doing. You know, come up with too many centralized power government solutions to otherwise legitimate problems. When Trump's talking about, we could cut off credit card rates to 10%. Okay, I understand the sentiment, but come on, you know, here's why that's a bad idea. And this from the same mouth and almost the same sentence as somebody talking about, you know, literally bringing back the Ron Paul proposal of ending taxes on tips, and then doubling down and adding, you know, no tax on overtime. So I'm like, okay, so like, honestly, every now and again when Trump throws a direct Ron Paul policy out of his mouth, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to applaud that, right? Because I know where you're getting that from, and I approve. But
I think that's a little bit of Vivek in his ear right there.
I'm sure.
Could be Vivek. Could be Judge Napolitano. He's real close friends with him too.
Yeah.
I think there so that there's only 2 degrees of separation from Ron Paul, right? So that's the nicest thing I can say about Donald Trump right now. Is he, even though I think he's completely unprincipled, I can say that he's at least close to principled people more than maybe he was before at one time. But at the same time, I mean, he picks guys like J.D. Vance and as a vice president. And honestly, you know, I was almost looking for an excuse to support him if he picked somebody like a Rand Paul or a Vivek Ramaswamy. Even I don't fully trust Vivek either, by the way, but still, at least he says the right things, right? Like
80%, and I'm kind of good with that.
80, 85 even, but still, he started out 80. I think he went to 85 after hanging out with us a little bit more and hanging out with Ron Paul a little more. But the thing of it is, he didn't do that. He picked somebody who is perfectly happy being in his shadow, and he picked somebody who still spews a lot of the social conservative, like shoot yourself in the foot stuff, like stuff you just shouldn't be saying about childless women. And I mean, we can all get a chuckle, right? And we can all laugh and like, you know, cat ladies and but it's bad, dude. It's just bad politics, man. I mean, this from somebody who doesn't even like have any real hope in the national level anyway, or certainly not the office of president, which I think isn't really even real anymore. It hasn't been since RFK Jr.'s uncle was murdered. I think the intelligence agency have been running the executive branch since that day. And Trump just didn't get the memo when he was elected, which I do think he was kind of an outsider. I think it was kind of a fluke that he's somebody like. I don't think anybody. Just him by virtue of being an outsider at that time, I definitely don't think he's an outsider now. But he certainly was, I think, at that time. And I don't think he got the memo that the intelligence agencies run the executive branch. That you don't really, you're just a spokesperson. That's your job as the president now. But it has been.
They drop some papers on your desk, and that's about it. You read them over.
Your job is to sell their agenda, the intelligence agency agenda, from the Oval Office. I think it's been that way since LBJ stepped in. But I don't think you should necessarily give up at least a decent campaign message. Right? At least have a decent message, because messaging is the only thing, apart from a few, Thomas Massey and the precious few others that stand up for liberty and maybe keep it from going total dystopia. The only real purpose of national campaigns, and certainly the campaign for president and vice president, is messaging. That's the purpose. And so you at least want to have decent messaging. But if you're coming off like are you like my question is like, are you even trying? I mean, honestly, it's like with this guy, I mean, you just don't, some of the stuff, you just don't say that. That doesn't play today, right? I mean, you're galvanizing the base. Like, there are better ways to galvanize your base than to attack somebody's childbearing preferences and whatnot. Like there's so many other things. That's the other thing that's so frustrating for me, is especially as libertarians, we know there's so many better things to attack Kamala Harris with. Like, right? I mean, that's the other thing. Like Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor is a horrendous evil, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, that would be, maybe it's just us, but that'd be the first thing out of my mouth. Like, why did you keep people in jail for a plant longer than they deserve to be? What did you gain from that? Like, why did you do that as a prosecutor? It'd be like the first thing out of my mouth. And then the other thing that he can't really say anything about, but what we could, if we were running against Kamala Harris, is why, what's the deal with you backing up the whole COVID tyranny thing? Like, why did you support it? Why did you go along with that? Why did you buy into the winter of death nonsense that your president you served with was spewing during the height of the COVID nonsense? Like, he should have been able to attack her record on that too, but of course he can't, because he still proudly calls himself the father of the vaccine, and that's the other thing. And I will share that as my complaint with the Trumpers. Like, your guy got this wrong. I mean, you understand there's a disconnect, because all the Trump people that I talked to, literally all of them, never got vaccinated. None of them. At least I would have. Yeah. So, but yet they support their guy who calls himself the father of the vaccine. I'm like, you guys understand that's a disconnect. I just need you to be aware there's some cognitive dissonance in play here. Because you didn't fall for it, but your guy pushed it. So understand that there's already a significant difference between you and your guy. And I leave it at that.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say they didn't fall for it. They flipped when their guy Trump didn't get in, and then the left and the Biden's supporters, or whatever you want to call them, that's when they kind of became the pro-vax, because now our guy is in pushing it. And if Trump would have got in, you would have had a different story. We would have still had the same old push vaccines, probably would have had the same old mandates. Eventually, I know a lot of them will argue and say, well, he was recommending, he didn't mandate anything. Well, give him another term and see what happens while we were in the so-called winter of death, right? See what happens. Maybe he does just continue to tote the line of recommendation and call himself the father of the vaccine, but he doesn't force it on anybody. But I think a lot of Trumpers would have gotten the vaccine if Trump would have won.
Interesting.
I think they would have.
That's interesting. You have a point.
Because you're wrong. Yeah, it's a cult. It's all a cult. Yeah, it's politics.
Oh, it is. I have a friend of mine that told me what's what blows my mind is a friend of mine went to his church this last Sunday, and I guess this pastor was given this ticket by one of the parishioners or whatever to go to a Trump dinner where the plates, it was $100,000 fundraiser. Like, so you're basically paying $100,000 to go to this thing. So this pastor came in and actually saw this thing and went to this event and whatnot. And he came back and he said, look, it's not that I'm not grateful for the opportunity. And it's $100,000 gift essentially that was just given to me. But I got to say, this was cultish. Like this, and I'm like, and this is like from Orange County, California is kind of, even your pastors are pretty much Republican. Like, everybody's shamelessly Republican in this part of California, right? And he's like, this is cultish and this is wrong. And I'm like, wow, applaud that pastor, wherever that guy is, because that's some objectivity that I don't think, other so-called religious leaders they don't seem to have that, and it is dangerous. And Zach, you may have a point. Maybe if he had managed to stop the steal or whatever, if he managed to be a president in the second term consecutively, maybe they would have gone along with it. Maybe they would have said, well, our hero, he says it's good, so I'm going to get it done. I hope you're wrong, but
I do too.
You can't underestimate the cultishness. It's still very much there. It's still very much there, and it does bug me. It really does. And the other part about that is that I know most of these people at the grassroots, who are people that I'm trying to build coalition with, they mean well, right? They're right. They really do. So I can't really, it's like I can't complain about their intentions, but that's maybe the other component, other than the vaccine in general, is the cultishness. Like dial this down. Like, you can at least see that this is maybe out of whack. Especially if they have any kind of faith, Christian or otherwise. Like, do you maybe see how this could be idolatry? Maybe just a little. Like, that maybe this is going a little too far. I think that's a legitimate part of the dialogue to have when you're trying to build a coalition, because you need to at least let them know, hey, I can still respect your intentions and your values for trying to get America into a better place. Whether it was ever good or not before is another topic, but I get the legitimacy of your intentions, but let's at least try to introduce a little bit of objectivity if we're going to be working together. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and you can slide in that that commandment there and say, "Thou shalt not worship other gods." But
yeah, no other gods before me.
Exactly.
Let's put it, and the typical response I get is, "Well, I don't put him above God." Well, okay, well, you're still kind of like, let's just.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
most of them are.
Yeah, let's maybe not even try to go that far anywhere near to elevating him to that much. He's just another mortal man, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
He's not, I mean, he's flawed. He has made some very serious missteps, and even if he was well intentioned, he doesn't have the principles to really be as effective as any of us would want him to be. If even if he had like carbon copied, Ron Paul's platforms. He still wouldn't necessarily be the best vehicle to deliver them.
I will say one thing. I mean, when it's kind of hard to separate everything, because I mean, when he takes that shot and just turns his head, I can give the Trumpers a little bit of leadway on saying, well, maybe that was a miracle. I mean, that was pretty miraculous.
Yeah, but I think the danger is, as somebody who believes as he does, I think the danger is assuming that just because God saved your ass, that you're right, that you're somehow justified for like God. I'm somebody that, I mean, I had a miraculous. I should be dead myself. Okay, I've experienced a miraculous, life-saving occurrence in my life. I'm not thinking that I'm going to be like some sort of political messiah. You might think that I am because I'm writing books about it, but the reality is I'm not thinking that I'm supposed to save people. I'm just like, I'm as imperfect and messed up as I ever have been. I just have been given an extra, a segment of my life, probably a long one, because God decided to save my wretched ass. Honestly,
the second act, huh?
Right. So I get to do act 2. And but I have no pretense that I'm some transforming hero of a paragon of virtue or something. Like I'm just trying to work out my own salvation with fear and trembling. I'm not trying to be some valiant spiritual leader. I know my flaws. I know that I need to repent multiple times daily. So, and I don't know if Donald Trump has that kind of humility. I don't know for sure. Hopefully he does. But the point being is, I know I would reject wholeheartedly any of the nonsense of the gear. Like that's like the last thing I want. Heck, I barely want people to know my real last name. Right. I mean, it's like, I don't, I'm not into the recognition. I don't want to be, I'm adored enough as it is. I mean, it's like, God sparing me, sparing my life when I had 1,000-to-1 chance of survival is all the adoration I need. And I think Trump, maybe because that experience was pretty amazing, maybe he is getting it a little bit. Like maybe tone down maybe show a little more humility. I don't know. But I got it. But like you said, though, there is something. I can get why they think he's a special individual because he's dodged, a couple attempts, on his life so far, and that's pretty amazing. So I got to say that's
3 now.
Yeah,
3 now.
Right.
Yeah.
The third one was legitimate. That's.
I mean, if the third one, but
for sure too.
I'm just wondering when is it all a psyop or are they trying to get him elected? Because it seems like his support goes way up as soon as they try to do it.
This could be like an offside kick kind of thing where they're going to they're giving themselves more time for whatever act that they're going to come up with after he's out of office.
Yeah.
Put it this way. I think that he's enough, although he's again not terribly principled. He's saying some of the right things and a lot of the not so right things. I don't think that he's even though some people want to paint him out as like he's part of the controlled opposition, I think he's got his toe, at least, if not maybe a full foot in the controlled opposition game. But I also don't think that he wants to play the full role or take on the full thing of being controlled opposition the way the rest of the GOP functions. Again, with those notable exceptions that we mentioned already. I don't think he wants his own, but I'm not going to also say that he's all of a sudden principled or anything like that either. I think that he's straddling, certain lines, and he's going to do what he thinks he needs to do and play whatever game he thinks he needs to play to be accepted as the next president. Again, be president again. So that makes him threatening enough that I think these are. Tend to think, and this isn't. I guess there's certainly a lot of people I respect who disagree. But I tend to think these are legitimate assassination attempts. Like they're not very well executed. They're not very they're not very well done. It's certainly not the CIA of 1963, but I think for the most part these are legitimate attempts. At least two of them were.
Look how they're trying to check out Fidel Castro. They screw that up so many times. It's not even funny.
Yeah. So, Well, and that's just it. But see, now therein lies. This is a whole other rabbit hole. Is it possible that they didn't assassinate Castro because we needed to have an enemy, like to fight against? That we needed to have this is how my theory works in politics in general. Is that unnecessary conflicts are perpetuated on purpose because you need to have an enemy to fight. This is how I think Republicans versus Democrats work, right? The mutual controlled opposition thing. So I'm almost thinking the attempts on Castro were deliberately foiled, and then that begs the question: was that what's happening with Trump? I don't think so. I think it's sort of it's just a mess all the way around. I'm not buying the idea that that is intentional missing going on. I think I have a hard time with that, but I do think though the Castro thing is kind of an interesting because why not have it? If you're an intelligence agency, think about it. Why wouldn't you want to have an enemy right there in your backyard?
Exactly.
We missed him again. Oh darn! We got to keep after him. So
whereas Trump, it kind of seems like maybe this is just a bunch of nut jobs that really hate Trump. I mean, who knows? I mean, I think the first kid, there's no question something's amiss. Because like you're telling me a 20-year-old kid doesn't have social media,
right? I'm
gonna call you bullshit on that one. Yeah. So I mean, and then the way that he was able to walk up on that roof and they left it empty, and they gave the local PD, who really they're just kind of lollygagging, like, I get a free off day. Most of them were probably Trump supporters anyway, so I get to be here, listen to Trump, so they don't really care. When it should have been the Secret Service that was running that op and maintaining the perimeter. And then I think the other time, I think it's legitimately, I don't think it's CIA. I don't think it's intelligence, but I do think it's DNC and the president, utilizing their power with the Secret Service and saying, maybe it'd be better if Secret Service gets pulled out. And we don't give him we make sure that he doesn't get enough security. So, I mean, if I were Trump, I'd be packing in on that private security from here on out.
Oh yeah.
You can hire me. I don't care who you are.
Right. There's a case to be made that that Trump isn't doing it. He's not complicit, but the CIA is trying to deliberately miss him so they have an enemy to fight internally. Right? So you can keep the country divided, keep the whole thing going, and really fire up the whole internal conflict. Right. It goes back to, and you're right about this too. This goes back. There's so many strategies go back to ancient Rome, because Rome was the first blueprint of a global dystopia, a really effective blueprint of a global dystopia. And divide and conquer comes back. That goes back to the Roman times, right? That's Rome employed that tactic against its own population, against those it governed. And divide and conquer is what we have. We are divided and we are conquered, and that's again grassroots coalition building. civil discourse, it undoes that division, at least in part, and probably enough in a number of cases where it can make a difference. And that's all. Like people say, this won't work in a lot of places. No, it doesn't need to work in a lot of places. This needs to work in a few. It just takes a few scattered townships, committed and working together or whatever, but still committed to nullification to bring down the house of cards. And as you guys said, the reprisal for that could be significant, and we need to kind of prepare for that too. Without going down any further rabbit holes, I've talked with some of other great liberty thinkers we all know about what it would look like to have for places that don't have natural agriculture to do indoor farming, hydroponics, to like literally create a food supply in even urban and densely suburban environments, like where I'm at. There's not a whole lot of farmland in the immediate area. There's some that could be converted into it, but I'm almost thinking indoor farming is safer when we start talking about, right? If you want a population that, like, they're trying to fabricate all sorts of climate crisis. Well, one way to shield against that is indoor farming. And without trying to go too far down another rabbit hole, this is the kind of innovation that I'm talking about. There's also technological innovation as well, which I know even less about. But the idea is to have a more or less protected food source that's local. And when I say protected, I mean, like, you could really bet on a commercial real estate bubble bursting. Like, there's going to be a commercial real estate. It's essentially already starting to crash on the commercial side of real estate. And a lot of commercial real estate, with a little bit of effort and a little bit of vision, can be converted into indoor agricultural. I see that as an opportunity, because again, to have a truly liberated township, you have to be disentwined, I think would be a word, from the gravy train that comes from the federal government to your state government to your local government. You need to kind of make your township, your immediate area, your immediate community, your city, town, whatever, a lot less dependent on the higher, like financially dependent on the handouts from the state and federal governments or the county or what have you. And you also have to have a pretty thriving economy and innovation and a way to counteract the necessities of services provided by major corporations. There needs to be a real independence from all of that as soon as possible. And obviously, the most rudimentary form of independence is growing your own food. Like, feed your like what happens when the food chain is not just disrupted but gone, right? It's like these are sort of like quasi-apocalyptic things I think we need to start thinking about. But at the same time, I wouldn't push. It would push, let's rethink the way we produce, grow, and distribute food. Because actually, if you think about it, on the whole, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that half the produce that I get that can be grown 20 miles from where I live is imported from Florida, halfway, literally the other side of the country, right? There's certain things that don't make a whole lot of sense about the way food is grown, produced, and shipped. And there's also because of the vast distances which food travels through this odd configuration. You have preservatives. You have all sorts of things that you're required to have injected. You know what I mean? Like, there's all sorts of extra junk that has to be brought in that isn't necessarily healthy. This is an RFK type thing. That isn't necessarily healthy. That is in our food, right? It is in our food that even just comes out of the ground. So there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of health and well-being, just in sort of decentralizing food production and distribution. There's a lot to be said for that from a health standpoint, let alone like the countering of a dystopia, implications. So that's another, I think, really important thing. Like, again, having as self-sustaining as possible township is part of the township liberation idea. Have that township be as able to sustain itself as possible economically, agriculturally, and everything. Even if it's like I said, even an urban township. I mean, why not have a skyscraper where half of it, on one side is all agriculture, indoor hydroponics? Well, why not?
Or
So
an empty large
right,
warehouse,
yeah,
anything.
yeah, anything. There, I mean, I've already had friends of mine, who did that in Oregon anyway. Uh, they did a whole indoor farming thing. It was cannabis, but it was like, still the idea is, it's indoor farming and by any other name. Why not use that? Going forward, I think that actually will become a bigger and bigger deal. And again, this is even the dystopian implications aside, it's just healthier. It just makes more sense to
Mhm.
have your food. I mean, the whole it's funny in gourmet restaurant circles, the whole farm to table thing is a big deal. And this is the
Mhm.
extension of that concept. So you don't have to have like a dystopia to fight to know that that's a good thing for your health.
An
Mhm.
effective framework.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, build relationships. I mean, what you talk about township liberation, nullification, coalitions. One of the best coalition to build is just going down and finding your local farmer and meeting Farmer Joe and learning what he does and everything that he's doing with the slaughter, the raising, the slaughter of livestock, growing the food, and I mean, go from there. Like, start this. You can even say, "Hey, I mean, if you give me some eggs, I'll shovel shit for a day." I mean, and he'll
Right.
probably be like, "Yeah, that's fine. Beats me. I don't like doing it. If you
Right.
want to come shovel." So,
There's so much opportunity for that sort of thing, and
mhm.
you're right. There's even an opportunity. Uh, there's so much opportunity uh, to barter on the agricultural level too. Like the good old
Mhm.
fashioned barter system is much more viable if people are growing their own food, right? And like, hey, I have these 6 vegetables that I grow on my property. You have 4 vegetables on yours, and I don't grow those 4, and you don't grow these 6, so let's trade. I mean, it becomes a real, I mean, for lack of a better term, communitarian kind of thing, and I
Mhm.
think that can only be a good thing. Ultimately, that's again, it
Oh
comes back
yeah,
to local action. It can only lead to good things.
yeah. And I mean, community is perfect. Collectivism's not, but community's perfect.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, as perfect as it can be. So,
It's
but
it's as close as you're going to get to civilization, right?
mhm.
We can actually behave civilly with one another. Uh, yeah, what I encourage people to do, obviously, is think locally, act globally, right? The old left wing adage. It really makes sense, though.
The old left libertarian idea. So that's
Right.
exactly how we do it, and
It,
that is probably the perfect way, the send off to end this thing. So, um, Andrew, you have anything to add or ask before we kind of call it?
No, I think I made my points during the program. So thank you
it,
for
Andrew,
joining us,
thank you.
Mike.
Yeah.
You look like you're about to be faded out and
I am a
slam your.
little beat. Yeah.
No, well, you had a long hard
Yeah,
day. So
it's late Eastern time, you guys. You guys are
yeah,
rallying.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
we
still got the
rally.
whole night ahead of me.
Yep. You still have you can still crack open a beer and
Oh, count
light
on
up a
it.
cigar. Yeah, light up a cigar and enjoy the evening, right?
I
I don't
think
know if you smoke a cigar.
I think the evening calls for another glass of mezcal, which is phenomenal. If you ever get a chance to drink mezcal, it's probably the finest product you can get from Mexico. It's a brilliant.
Nice.
It's so smooth. It's like tequila, but more subtle, more dangerous. It's great.
I don't know if it's anything like tequila. I might need to stay away from it, but I'll try it.
Maybe,
I'll
yeah.
try it. So, but thank you again, though, Mike. I mean, like you said, I mean, just local. Just think local. Do local. Be local. I mean, there's nothing more
Don't
to
be
it,
homeless.
really. Don't
Yeah,
don't be politically
yeah.
homeless. In fact, you know what? Be politically homeless, because politics. I mean, as Thomas Massey, we've talked about him this whole time. He
Yeah.
even made he literally cut a promo on the House floor, calling everything political theater. So I mean, it's
Yes.
getting out there. So that was brilliant, by the
That
way.
was bold. Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. It's all
Hmm.
political theater, and I'm glad we have the antidote for that. And again, it comes
Hmm.
down to the only place where, and I don't even like the term politics either. When it comes to local action, I call it civics because it's about your
Hmm.
civic duty. I think that's a better expression than politics. Politics implies
Yeah.
working with liars and bribers and everything else. But civic duty, that's something else. That's what we're talking about at the local level. It's more easy to see how it impacts your life right when you're doing it right in front of you.
All right. Well, Mike, I know everybody should know where to follow you at, but would you like to drop your tag? And
Sure.
it'll be in the description.
Yeah, it's on X. I'm at 2FreeMike. I'm also running at Town Liberation, which is Township's Liberation X page, and I'd love to hear from anybody that's interested in organizing at the local level. If you want to get involved building coalitions and trying to make a difference for liberty in your immediate area, in your local community, reach out to me. Let's talk about it. I do X Spaces workshops to that effect from the Township Liberation account, and it's time to really start focusing on that wherever you are in the world.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And then you can also go get the book. So we got to plug that book out. So
Revival of Common Sense: The Case for Township Liberation. It's good fun.
So also in the description. So go cop a copy. So ebook form or traditional book if you want to have the physical copy in your hand. So, but thank you again, Mike. Andrew, any last words there, buddy?
No, we're good, man. Thanks for watching, guys.
Take care, Andrew, Zach.
So I am the legacy of Jennifer and Kaiser. That's Andrew Joseph. I'm Zachary Kaiser. Thank you again, Mike Decentralized, Township Liberation, and let's get dirty and get to work. So
there we go.
Let's take it on out.
All right, guys. Have a good night.